Hey everybody, Ms. Dietrich here. We're looking at number 2. It says select 2 rectangular prisms that have the same volume. And before we go on, this came from a textbook company that actually has a typo, because see how they're giving you what I've been calling big B. Remember, big B is the area of the base. So quite frankly, there really should be an exponent of a 2 here, and there should be an exponent of a 2 here, and there's not. And that's really, I don't know if that would confuse people who didn't have a teacher that brought that to your attention, but that's a typo. So both of these should be squared. In class, we talked about these two formulas and how do you know which one to use when. We use this formula to find the volume if the length and the width and the height of the rectangular prism are given. We use the red formula if we know the area of one of the faces, or the area of what we might call the base of the rectangular prism. So in other words, for A, B, and E, we're going to use the blue formula. And for C and D, we're going to use the red formula. So let's look at question A. It says 4 1/4. Volume equals 4 1/4. And if you have a calculator, it seems like most of these numbers are terminating. If this had been like a 1/3, then that would be, that 0.3333 thing that we would have going on. But since it terminates, we can rethink that as a decimal. But don't round anything, folks, because we have to figure out which ones have the same volume. And if you round, then that's going to throw things off. All right, so for the width on this one, we have 2 3/4, which is equal to 2.75. And then for the height on this thing, it's 3. So let's multiply these numbers that I have written down. We'll use the calculator. And let's see what we get. 4.25 times 2.75 times 3. And we get this number. So again, don't round it. So we get 35.0625. 35.0625. So that's what we got for choice A. Now, if we get that same thing for any of the other choices, then we pick A, and whatever other one we get that number. But let's see what we get when we put the numbers in for B. So for B, the values are 3 7/8. Whoops, I'm on the wrong screen. Sorry about that. 3 7/8. So when we think about what's 3 7/8 as a decimal, we know it's going to be 3.7. If we do 7 divided by 8, we get this, right? So 7 divided by 8 is that, which means that 3 7/8 would be 3 and then that number again was 875. The width on this thing is 2, and the height is 4.5. All right, so we're going to multiply all these numbers together, and we're not going to round. Let's clear it. 3.875 times 2 times 4.5. And we get this. Now, that doesn't match what we got for choice A, but we still need to write this number down. This is the volume for B, 34.875. Let's write it down. 34.875. All right, now I'm going to do C together with you, but you're going to have to do D and E by yourself. So if we do C, that's the one where we're going to use this formula because they give us the area of one of the faces. They give us the area of the base. So we're going to use this red formula to find the volume of choice C, which would be, excuse me, I have a little bit of a cough, would be 6.5 for big B times this number, 5 3/8. Now, if we're going to use a calculator, we can turn that 3 divided by 8 into a decimal, which would be this. So it's going to be 5.375. And when we multiply these two numbers together to get the volume of the entire thing, we have 6.5 times 5.375. And we get this number. Volume equals, and see, that's not the same thing. It's awfully close, but it's not the same thing as this. But let's write it down. We got 34.8 9375. All right, so you're going to do this one in the same way. This as a decimal would be equal to 7.75. This as a decimal would be equal to 4.25. Multiply those two numbers together and see if you get any of these. And then for this one, you're going to multiply 6 times, and then to find what 3/8 is as a decimal, you can do 3 divided by 8, and you get that number, right? So it's going to be 1 and then the 0.375 times 4.25. And one of these will match the other. You want to pick the two that have the same volume. Now, if you prefer to turn all of these into improper fractions and do it that way, then you won't have to deal with these long decimals. For some of you, that may be a better approach. But otherwise, just stick to the plan. We already have the volume of 3 of them. Go ahead and finish up.